Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Call from Harriet Radinsky.
That's not mine. I think that's Harlan's phone.
Radinsky.
Yes, what can I say? Okay. So we have quite a bit to go in terms of this poem, right? The Shirat Hayam, which is nice because I know that they do it on Shabbos morning. Actually, it's part of everyday service, and so kind of getting into it a little bit, understanding a little bit more of it. I was reflecting about this poem and what are sort of the emotions that come out of it, because truly, I think the idea is that the real victory is God's. That people, human beings who think that theirs is the victory are making a mistake. And I think maybe that is what is remarkable about this poem. First of course, the miracle was extreme. It was an extreme miracle, but also the idea that certainly this was all God's doing, but to understand in the expression of this song that we shouldn't pride ourselves on whatever successes and victories, quote, quote, we have, but to recognize that ultimately we should, in this fact, perhaps be very humble about it. And one thing for sure I do know is that you never crow about your victories. It's a terrible thing. So anyway, going on. Uvarov gaoncha, in your great majesty, taharos kamecha, you demolish those who rise up against you. Tishalach harancha, you send forth your anger, your chlemo kakash, that it consumes them like straw. So, uvarov gaoncha, and with your great majesty, in your great majesty. Im hayad bilvad ro'etzet ha'oyev, right? If the hand alone crushes the enemy, keshehu merima barov geono, that when in other words, if the hand itself is able to crush the enemy, and we're speaking, of course, extremely anthropomorphically and metaphorically, when he raises up, when he raises it up, that is his arm, berov geono, in his great majesty, as Yaharos Kamav, he totally destroys, right, those who rise up against him. The Imbarov Gaono Lavad, and if it were just in his great majesty alone, Oivav Neharsim, his those who are his enemies would be destroyed. Kal vachomer, all the more so, keshe bam charom af yochlemu. So we're looking at added degrees. So kal vachomer, all the more so, when he sent against them his anger, his fierce anger, he consumes them. He consumes them. So what Rashi is doing is looking at the structure of the verses, of the words of the verse, and showing us how they actually describe increasing power. Taharos, right? You destroy. Tamid atahores kamecha. You are always able to, or you always destroy those who, in a way, hores, the haros, is to take apart, right? To tear apart, something like that, right? To those who rise up against you. Hakamim negdecha, those who rise up, right? Those against you. This kamecha, he's explaining kamecha, this word kamecha, hakamim negdecha, those who rise up against you, which is of course the way I translated it. Umihem hakamim kenegdo, well, who are those who rise up against him, in opposition to him? Elu hukamim al Yisrael. In fact, they are those who rise up against the Jewish people. And this, of course, is reflective of second Isaiah, of Isaiah, who, the classic explanation of the troubles and the adversity coming upon the Jewish people is their lack of faith in God. But Isaiah comes up with another explanation, which doesn't involve any fault on the part of the Jewish people, but that in some ways the Jewish people, because of their belief, that is the initial belief of our ancestors, etc., and our system of believing in God, Shema Yisrael, right? That very strong belief in one God. There are people who hate Jews. That's one explanation of anti-Semitism. That in some ways, and is actually this is quite a deep thing, because I really do believe that our performing mitzvot, right, and our belief and our philosophy is there for us to become, in a sense, and you've heard me say this many times, right, a conduit for the divine into this world. So in some ways, when we do act according to our beliefs and according to our the foundations of our religion, we are representing God here. And of course, what do they say, right? What you do is you punish the messenger. So this is basically what Rashi is saying here. V'chein hu omer, and so it says. Actually, there's a quote from Scripture, Tehillim Pei Gimel. This would be Psalm 83. Ki hine hoivecha yohemayun, for behold, your enemies, addressing God, of course, Yehamayun, they roar. Umahi hahemya, and what are they roaring about? Al amcha, and here they go. The verse goes on. Al amcha, on your people, they roar against your people. Um, Ya'arimu sod, they plot deceitfully, so they secretly plot against. Va'alzeh kore otam oivav. And look at this, the fact that they're doing this against the Jewish people, he calls them his enemies. Oivav shel makom, the enemies of God. Interesting thought here in analyzing this particular verse. So it's another way of understanding anti-Semitism, that in some ways it is how can I put it, the pointless and sad addition, action on the part of human beings against the divine, against the true creator. Uvaruach, going back to the next verse, Uvaruach apecha, and in ruach means a spirit or a wind, etc. Let's say the breath of, and in the wind of your anger, ne'ermu mayim, the water went into heaps, it became heaps. Nitzvu kamoned noslim. Nitzvu means like they stood erect, like a skin. In other words, they were like this. If you can just picture it, this skin standing up, and there's water. That's actually water. The liquid, right? Linzol means like to pour, to drip, etc. Kaf'u. This is, again, by the way, just a quick comment. This is typical of Hebrew poetry. Notice the parallelisms, the expression of the same idea in different words. That is typical of biblical Hebrew poetry, scriptural poetry for sure, right? Kaf'u teomot, the depths congealed belev yam, in the midst of the sea. So, and again, the idea of water becoming solid in this particular way at that particular moment. So Rashi's explaining an expression here that is af means nose, or in this case, so in other words, in the wind from your nose. Right? So that's a way in which you describe anger. He's going to tell you, Hayotze mishnei nechirim shel af, that is to say, the air that escapes from the two nostrils of the nose. That's what it means. Uvaruach apecha. That where he says that's the way to understand most literally that expression. In other words, that it's suggesting that we're talking about the breath that comes out of the nostrils. Diber hakatuv, the scripture speaking kiviyachol, right? bashkina. It's speaking, of course, anthropomorphically about the divine. It's not about the Shekhinah. It's not to be taken literally. It's to be understood simply as an expression. And he explains, Dugmat Melech. This is an example of a king. It's giving an example, Basarvadim, of a mortal king. Today, why? And so, why is Scripture speaking in this way about God when God doesn't have nostrils and doesn't have, he's not. God isn't physical. God is something beyond this, right? So the reason is Kedei lahashmia ozin habriut. It means literally the way Sfaria, that's my abbreviation there, translates this to be able to attune the ears of human beings. What it's saying is it's trying to speak in a language that people can understand. That is, so it uses human speech, or it uses human attributes. And we do this. I mean, it's not only a scriptural thing. The idea of speaking anthropomorphically is simply a way of trying to communicate an idea, right? But not to take it literally. Kefi hahoveh, according to their experience. Sheyichlu lahavin davar, so that they can understand a matter, the matter probably. Keshe Adam koes, because when a human being, gets angry, yotzeh ruach minicharav, right? Wind flows out of his nostrils, right? Breath comes out of his nostrils. And likewise, we have another example in Psalm 18. Allah Ashan ba'apo, right? Smoke arose in his nostrils. I'll say, although apo means anger, means nose literally, but very often this term nose is used to describe anger, right? The way a human being physically expresses anger. And likewise in Job chapter 4, umeruach apo yochelu, something like that, or yikalu, through the literally, and from the breath of his anger they are consumed. Vezehu shamar, and this is exactly what Isaiah, right, says in Isaiah 48. Lema'an shemi, this is going in a different direction. Lema'an shemi, this is again speaking in the name of God. For my sake, a'arich api. So it says aroch is to lengthen, right? So this is, I will lengthen. Again, it literally means nose, but it means my anger. I'll allow my anger. And what here it is, that he is going to lay down, so to speak, his anger. And he's not going to, because we know that anger can happen very quickly, right? That's another thing that can happen, is that anger happens in a very quick kind of way. Arichapi means, I will allay my anger, is what he's saying. Kishiza'afor nacha. Za'af is spelled differently. It's not an aleph. Aleph is af, is with an aleph pei. This is za'af, when his anger nacha rests. Nishimato aruka, right? Your breath you can take long breaths. And we know, taking a long breath is a way in which we can try to calm ourselves down. However, when he is anger, nishimato, this is of course talking about human beings. You know how human beings react. His breath, right? His breathing, kitsara, are short. They come out in short breaths. And again, this must be in Isaiah 48. V'tehilati at echatem lecha, right? So this is echatem lecha ulaman tilati asim chatam ba'api. So I don't know if this is the entire verse or whether it just says, it sounds, ulaman sounds like a biblical expression. That's biblical Hebrew. So this could be a parallelism, right? So so it means for my praise, right? Achatem lecha, right? So it means in some ways, chotem is a signet ring, okay? But it says, I will place a ring in my nose, right? Ulaman tilati, and again, for my praise, asim chatam ba'api, I will place this a ring or a signet ring in my nose, listom nechirai. This of course is not, this is Rashi speaking, uh, uh, to seal up, to close up my nostrils, the panai, bifnei ha'af, in the face of the anger, v'haruach shelo yetzu, and the air that's coming out of it, that they shouldn't come out. So this expression in Isaiah is, in a way, the way it's coming across to me is that there'd be reason for God to be extremely furious at the behavior, I think, whether or not this is the Jewish people that he's referring to, but there is people are doing something that causes divine fury, and God is saying, I'm going to overcome, I'm going to, in a way, right, using again this anthropomorphic language, I'm going to block my nose so that I don't express my anger. I'm not going to. God is saying that you should know that God's mercy and God's lack of expression of fury against humanity, against the world, is something for which God should be praised tremendously, right? Because we know how difficult is it to control our anger. It's one of the most important disciplines that we can ever try to attain, is not allow ourselves to be consumed with anger. So even though this might be justifiable, right, in terms of the divine anger, the divine wrath, nevertheless, God is going to overcome it. God is not going to let that happen. This again is Isaiah just speaking so amazingly, right? Lacha, the lacha here is bishvilcha, right? Here, tom lacha, meaning for you. Echatam, I will seal it up. I will use a ring, as it were, to lock it up. Kamo ne'eka. So there's an example like a na'aka, a camel, a female camel, bechatam, right? So there's an expression, b'Masechet Shabbat, in the tractate Shabbat, na'aka bechatam, meaning a camel with a nose ring, which is mentioned in Masechet Shabbat, page 51. Kach nir'eh b'einai, and I believe this is Rashi saying, this is how I understand it. V'chol af v'charon, and every time it uses the expression of af, this term af, and charon, again, it's another expression of anger, sheba makra, that is in scripture. Ani omer, this is again Rashi saying his opinion. I think, Cain, right? I think this is sorry. Yeah, Ani Omer, Kain Chara'af, that the expression Chara'af, right? His anger is excited, right? Is how we would understand it. That's similar to an expression in Job chapter 30. Atzmi Chara Mini Chorev. And my bones, right? Or Atzamai, it could be, my bones, Chara, are burning. So this word Chara, right? Burning anger, burning, the nose being that expression, that physical expression, Mini Chorev, from heat. My bones are burning from heat. Lashon Sreifa, in other words, this is an expression of fire, umoked, or a hearth, shanechirim, because the nostrils, mitchamamim, because the nostrils become hot, unecharim, and burning, they're burning, ba'et haketzef, at the time of anger. The charon, okay, and this term charon, migzerat chara, right? So the term charon is a noun. It's a noun from anger, migzerat chara. In other words, it's similar to a word that ends with a hey like this, chara, again meaning to become anger. Kamor ratzon, just as the noun desire, right? Desire. Migzerat ratza is, again, you see that's resh tzadik hey. This is chet resh hey. So this hey becomes the on. Ratza is a verb. He desired, right? And we're talking about desire, noun. Vechein chama lashon chamimut, right? And likewise, the word chama, which by the way is a word that we use for sun as well, but it's from the word cham to mean hot, lashon chamimut. The chamimut is again a noun from the from chama, right? So he's understanding possibly whether he's saying chama as a verb or chama as a noun, but chamimut, of course, is definitely a noun. Al kain hu omer, and for this reason, he says the chamato, right? There's chamimut, chamato, his anger, ba'arabo, burned within him. Right, so this is from Esther talking about King Achashverosh when he got angry, I believe, with Vashti. Uvenoach hachama and chema, probably chema here, even though there's so. I believe this maybe so. This word here we're pointing should be read as chema. There are no points, and I looked in Sfaria as well, and that text at Rashi text that I saw didn't have vowels in it either. It wasn't vocalized either, right? So uvenoach ha-chema, and when the anger is assuaged, when it rests. Omer nitkarara da'ato. It uses an expression in Hebrew. So he's explaining idiomatic language in Hebrew, right? That is his opinion, his thought cooled off. And we use that such things in English as well. This is sort of, I suspect, an international way of expressing these particular ideas, right? Ne'emu mayim, the waters piled up. Onkelos Tirgem. However, Onkelos translates this. And by the way Rashi says it, he says Ketirgem Onkelos or Onkelos Tirgem. I think Onkelos, when he says Onkelos Tirgem, he doesn't agree with Onkelos, but very often, of course, he does. Lashon Armimut. He says he understands it as an expression of shrewdness. Ne'emu Mayim. La'arim, this ayin resh mem, right, can mean to act shrewdly, right? So he says, in other words, that the waters acted in this shrewd way, that they piled up like this, so they became this, because with the intention, of course, ultimately of drowning the Egyptians. Ulashon sachut hamikra. But he says, if you really want to understand scripture, you'll have to excuse me. I hear someone uh, speaking. You make sure you're muted, please. Ulashon nachut hamikra, but to understand scripture clearly, it's more like an in Shir Hashirim in Song of Songs, chapter 7, aremat chitim, a heap, a pile of wheat. In other words, venitzvu kamed nos yochiach, and the fact that that the verse goes on to say that they stood erect like a kamonade, right, as a pile, I think it's what. Oh, sorry, nade he's understanding nade as a skin. At least there, it's what it is. Okay. Let's see. Let me here. Let me find it here. Yeah, it proves it, right? That they stood up erect. Ne'emu mayim, right? The waters stood erect. Mi moked ruach. So he's talking about from the strong wind, right? The wind just was blowing so hard. Sheyatsa me'apecha, from that went out of your nostrils. Yevshu hamayim, the waters dried up. Vehem ne'esu min galim, and they became like a type of waves, right? A gal is a wall, actually, as well. So galim also is a word that we use for waves, but I guess it really is the idea of waves being like walls, water walls. Okay, let me see. Uchriyot shel arima shehem gvorim. Sorry, I'm looking into seeing what this translates as. Lauren, are you there? Do you have a translation of the Rashi there? Arima is a pile. Shehem Gvorim.
Um, it says, okay, Arim, it says here cleverness.
That's the Onkelos. That's up here.
Oh,
Keep going.
yeah, yeah.
Quite a bit
Okay,
more.
so, but the pure sense, Water piled up similar, okay, to a heap of wheat, it says.
Right.
Aramat,
Chitim, yes.
yeah.
Right.
Following phrase, the flowing stream stood erect like a wall.
That's
Proof.
this one here. So they translate, right. Right. Go on. So we're still a little bit further on.
The water piled up from the burning heat of the breath that came out of your nose.
Yes, that's there.
Water dried up into a solid mass and
Okay.
became like mounds and stacks of
Okay,
atomic
there we
heat.
go. Okay, so Friyot is mounds. Sorry, I did not have the translation for that. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. So, okay, mounds. Right. Okay. And Arima is a pile, something like that. Shehem Gvohim, that are high up. And I'm going to stop here for now. I'm going to mark the place and we'll continue this. Let me make sure I have this. For some reason, I'm not getting the marking here. Let's try again. Oh, Bart, you raised your hand, please. Go ahead, unmute.
Yeah. Okay. Oculus means what exactly?
Say that again.
Oculus, os.
Onkelos. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Onkelos is the name of the Aramaic translation of the Torah. That's what he's referring to. I'll show you this here. Okay, hold on a sec, and I'm going to show you. So, do you see this?
Yeah.
Onkelos.
Yeah.
So, you understand that the very first exile of the Jewish people was to Babylonia. And
Hmm.
Babylonia is also known as Aram Naharaim. That's like Aram of Mesopotamia, between the two rivers.
Yeah.
And and so Aramaic is the language they speak in Babylonia. And so just like in this country, if you look at most Jews, how many of them are fluent in Hebrew? Very few. How many of them are fluent in English? Lots of them. And so what happened is Onkelos was one of the earliest translations of the Hebrew into Aramaic, so that because making sure that Jews were educated and knowledgeable, it's very difficult to actually practice as a Jew if you're totally ignorant, and certainly ignorant of the Torah. So he is one of the earliest translations of Hebrew into Aramaic. And even though it's sort of like an English translation, next to the Hebrew.
Hmm.
However, his translation is a very authoritative translation, and of course, it's probably a translation in a way is also a an interpretation. So
So Oculus
his
is a translator.
yeah, yes, it is. It's referring to the Aramaic, the specific Aramaic translation of Onkelos. Okay,
All
let me see
right.
if I can find the word. Let's see here. Uh, I'm trying to find out where it's saying where he's translating it as clever, something like that. I'm not finding it right this second. So let's yeah, here's the word. Hakimu. That's the word that's the Aramaic word, right? The waters plotted, something like that. That's why Rashi says he translates ne'ermu. Onkelos is translating the word ne'ermu as hakimu. Hakimu Maya. Maya is the Aramaic word for Mayim. You see their cognate languages. They're
Water.
both
Got it.
Semitic. So there we are. Yeah, the tradition was to study a verse in Hebrew, then Onkelos, and then a verse in Hebrew again. That in trying to master Torah, that was a traditional way of studying Torah. So nowadays, the way to do it in our country in English would be to read a verse in the Hebrew, then a verse in the English translation to get a sense of what the Hebrew means and to start trying to begin to master Hebrew. So for many years, actually, that's what I did, in fact, do was read it that way. And I'm going to stop the share here. So, yeah. Any other questions for the record before I stop the recording? Yeah. All right. I'll let it go. Thanks.